Broadcasting across the Golden State, this is Inside California Politics.
Thanks for joining us for Inside California Politics. I'm Frank Buckley in Los Angeles.
And I'm Nikki Lorenzo in Sacramento. For the second time this year, a Capitol police officer has been killed in an attack at the U.S. Capitol. Friday, a suspect rammed his car into a police barrier, killing at least one officer. That suspect has also been killed. Joining us now, Northern California Congressman John Garamendi. Congressman Garamendi, thank you for being back on Inside California Politics.
I'm delighted to be with you, but certainly not delighted about this subject. This is really tragic and so terribly sad.
So what went through your mind when you got the call that there was another deadly attack at the U.S. Capitol, the second in 3 months?
Well, our cell phones, all the members' cell phones are connected to the Capitol Police, and we get notices perhaps 3 or 4 times a week that something is amiss at the Capitol. And so when the phone buzzed, I took a look at it and they said the Capitol shut down. Well, no big deal. And then a few moments later, information about the attack and that an officer had been wounded. 2 officers had been wounded. And I just go, how tragic. And here we are within 2 months of January 6th and all the terrible violence that took place there. And here we are again. The Capitol has become a target. It's become a target for people that are mad for any number of reasons, and they're taking it out on the symbol of our democracy. It's tragic, not only with the death of this policeman and the wounding of another, the individual, the perpetrator, obviously killed too. I don't know where it's going to end. This violence is just seems to be more and more every day.
You are back in your district right now on Easter break.
Yes.
When you go back to D.C., do you feel safe there?
Well, I'm not sure safe is anywhere. Where was Orange this weekend in Orange, the city of Orange, Southern California? An office complex, somebody walks in, 4 dead, including a 9-year-old child. Schools getting shot up, and the Capitol. We've got police, and we're still going to have the National Guard nearby. And there are barriers, and this individual didn't get through the barrier. Perhaps any one of us could have been walking nearby and maybe had been the target. But I feel safe in the Capitol. Yes, we have the security. But the rest of the nation is on edge because it appears as though there's nowhere that's safe. The number of shootings, the number of mass killings, and it goes on. We're going through a very difficult period now for many reasons, and hopefully it'll settle down in the days ahead.
Has there been any discussion with your colleagues about adding more security measures to the Capitol in light of this?
Oh, there are definitely going to be different security measures. There will be additional Capitol Police hired. Most of these officers have been working overtime shifts, so that'll be one thing. The barricades have been there, but there will be some different kind of fencing put up, not the barbed wire, not the kind of fencing that we saw in recent months. But there will be additional security measures, and clearly the windows and doors are going to be strengthened. And I would suspect that there'll be various kinds of barriers or doors and others within the Capitol complex itself, so that easy access from one side to the other can be prevented if necessary.
There has been some discussion among law enforcement that this suspect had posted some issues on social media, been skeptical of the CIA, of the FBI. Anytime something like this happens and social media is involved, that discussion of regulation and should social media be policed more? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a very complex, difficult decision and answer to that question. Clearly, there is an enormous amount of misinformation, purposely misinformation in the media. We're seeing it on the vaccination programs today. You can go through the various social media platforms, and you'll see a lot of information that is simply not accurate at all about vaccinations. And people reading that stay away from the vaccinations. The result of that is more people will have COVID, more people will get infected, and the variants will emerge. So the answer here is for there to be programs, media such as yours and others that are dissecting the facts and getting the facts out there so that it is known. Now, unfortunately, the cable channels are often filled with misinformation also. So I think we need to be aware as citizens in this country, aware that everything you read may not be factual. And check it out. Don't believe it on first. Go to a different source. Flip the channels around. However, I will note that your program is accurate, and I thank you for the opportunity to be with you.
On that note, appreciate the endorsement, Congressman Garamendi. Thank you so much for your time and being back here on Inside California Politics. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Governor Newsom publicly received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine this week, this coming against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic and a recall effort to remove him from office. A new PPIC survey released this week, they found 56% of Californians would vote to keep the governor in office and only 40% would vote to replace him. This week, in an interview with Politico, former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger said the atmosphere around the current recall and the one in 2003 are essentially the same. One strategist with ties to the 2003 recall election says Newsom and his team should not relax despite the current favorable polling numbers. Joining us now, Democratic strategist Michael Trujillo. Michael, welcome to Inside California Politics. Good to talk to you.
Happy to be here.
So right off the bat, you think the governor deserves to be recalled?
No, I think the governor has, it's been some rocky waters. It's definitely been a tough going, but it's been that way for every governor across the country. And so the question really has to be, has California done worse than any other state? And the question, in my opinion, is no. But does that mean that there are folks not in the state that have a really good reason to recall him? Sure. Everyone comes from a different lived experience. They have a different set of priorities. And so voters may have a good reason in their mind, but for me, that reason does not exist yet.
It has been dubbed a Republican power grab. Do you think that's, in your opinion, on the Democratic side, is that a good strategy to call it that?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a Democratic state. I live in a blue city and a blue state, and so it's a very simple calculation that Team Newsom is doing here to make it partisan. They know that there's a wide gap, at least between Democrats and Republicans, and even the independents tend to lean more liberal than conservative. So it's just a simple arithmetic on their end in terms of the strategy that they're employing.
So you worked on the recall effort back in 2003 on the no side. Do you see similarities when you're looking at 2003 and now?
Yeah, I think, look, there was a piece this morning about former Governor Schwarzenegger basically giving current Governor Newsom some advice, and I think his advice was right on. I think the angst amongst voters, amongst residents of California is at levels never seen before. You have family members that have lost loved ones. You have parents that want to get their kids back in school. You have parents that are nervous about their kids going back to school. You have students that are nervous about everything. I mean, this runs the gamut. And so, this state is a virtual tinderbox. And at any moment, any flame or spark can set it off. And that's what happened in 2003. And we're in the same dynamic now in 2020. Or 2021, but we're looking at different dynamics. There's more Democrats than Republicans than existed in 2003. And, obviously the governor's favorable numbers are in a stronger position than where Gray Davis was.
That being said, as you said, his favorables are higher. One argument on the Democratic side is that, the worst is behind us in terms of what the governor has faced with the vaccine rollout. Kids are going back to school. Voters will see that and say, my life is kind of getting back to normal, and this recall effort will kind of subside. Do you think that's accurate?
That's one theory. I am a good old-fashioned paranoid Democrat 24/7. And so I don't think the worst days are behind us. I'm nervous about a fourth wave. I'm nervous about the anxiety and the amount of counseling students are going to need to re-enter school. I'm worried about our economy, whether it gets tripped up or snagged up, as opposed to being a roaring success that most folks think it might be. I'm worried about a lot of things. And so you should never take anything for granted. You shouldn't sit on your laurels. You should be humble the entire time and not try to push or bully your way through this recall, but, ask the voters to make a judgment, and hopefully that judgment is no on the recall.
So you said at the top that you don't think the governor should be recalled, but what do you think his biggest mistake has been so far?
I mean, the French Laundry incident is not only a mistake. It tells, if he was that comfortable doing it then, it means he was comfortable doing it before, and he's probably comfortable doing it after. I know he got vaccinated today here in Los Angeles, and that's fantastic. But someone whose mindset is not always thinking as that of a role model, but maybe more just of a fashion model. That's a dangerous mindset, and that's I hopefully he's taken the lesson to heart. But what I saw at French Laundry was someone that's probably done it many times before, while telling the rest of California to do something else.
So what advice would you give him as a strategist?
Well, I think my advice would be humble. I think voters, as they're looking at you on TV each and every night, they're not in the same position to smile and to be excited. They're in a position of, am I going to be able to pay this month's rent? Is my loved one going to, survive COVID? Is my youngest one going to be able to go back to school and succeed and read at a grade level? Those are the concerns of Californians, regardless of what nationality you are, or what age you are, or what gender you are. And I think the governor has to sort of take that to heart each and every day and represent that part of California.
All right, before I let you go, I got to ask you about one of your former bosses, the former LA mayor, Antonio Villaraigosa.
Many bosses.
Yes. So some think that he may be putting some breadcrumbs out there on social media with some of his tweets, that if this recall does get certified, that he might be interested in running. Is that true?
Well, the good news is I haven't talked to him about running, so I can't speak to that. But, former Mayor Willie Brown, former Speaker of the Assembly Willie Brown, the Ayatollah of Sacramento, said we should put a Democrat up just in case. Why should we put all our marbles in one basket? Why shouldn't we have some insurance policies so that way no Republican would become governor? And I'm in agreement with Willie Brown. He's much older, much wiser, and has a lot more wisdom than I do. And so my opinion is, if you're older than Willie Brown, then you can tell him that he's wrong. If you're younger than Willie Brown, then we should just shut up and fall in line.
We'll leave it there. Democratic strategist Michael Trujillo, thank you so much for being on Inside California Politics. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up next on Inside California Politics, hundreds of migrant teens are being housed at San Diego's Convention Center. Congressman Scott Peters on the task ahead for lawmakers surrounding immigration.
Up to 1,400 migrant girls are expected to be housed at San Diego's Convention Center this weekend. All of them are seeking asylum without their parents or families. Vice President Kamala Harris has been tasked with leading the effort to try to slow the flow of migrants to our southern border. Joining us now, San Diego Congressman Scott Peters. Congressman, let's start with the situation in San Diego. Hundreds of migrant girls are being housed at the San Diego Convention Center. You took a tour there last week before they arrived. Are you satisfied with what you saw there?
Yes, and I took another tour actually after they arrived on Sunday with Senator Padilla, and I am satisfied. I was able to visit the holding facilities, I guess, by the Border Patrol under the previous administration in McAllen, Texas. And I don't attribute any ill will to the Border Patrol, but they just weren't made to hold children. They had the chain link fences, and they didn't have any facilities. They didn't have cots, so they were laid out on these foil blankets. This is a much more humane setting for these girls, and I think they'll be much safer and well cared for as they continue on their journey to their family members or sponsors.
Having said that, you did say in your remarks, and I'll quote, you said this is not the answer to immigration reform, this is not the answer to asylum reform. Our action here today and over the next few months is not to fix all that. This is an act of compassion, neighbor to neighbor. The number of children being housed at the convention center, just a fraction of the total number at all of the border facilities. How do we get to those reforms that you mentioned?
Well, there are a few things we need to do. First of all, we need to acknowledge that the border is closed to everyone who's not a United States citizen or a legal permanent resident. The only people who are coming over are folks who have been processed through the Remain in Mexico program. That's about 25,000 people total, and unaccompanied minors. And international law obligates us to treat them with compassion and to process them. So what would we do? We should invest in processing. There's no reason that our resources should be so limited that we should have these people, any people waiting, months to a year to get a hearing. They should get a hearing. Most adults will be returned, by the way, although children will get to stay if they have a family member or someone who will sponsor them. We also need to invest in deterring or diminishing the reason why people come. When situation improved in Mexico economically, people stopped coming from Mexico. Right now, the Northern Triangle countries are a place where there's no opportunity. There's tremendous gang violence, and parents are making the awful decision to send their kids to the United States through coyotes in this very difficult journey because they have no better choice for them. And so we should be working, and Vice President Harris will be leading this effort to improve conditions through foreign aid in those places, very much like we rebuilt Germany after we beat them in the war in World War II. We can invest in that area. It will help them, but it will help us deter these waves that come every spring.
Well, you mentioned Vice President Harris. Is there anything that she can do to slow this flow to the border that the administration isn't doing right now?
Yes. I visited Honduras on a congressional trip, and I saw conditions there. And you hear these heartbreaking stories of people who try to start businesses and get shaken down by the mob. One brother I met decided to flee. They both worked, and he worked in a factory with his brother. His brother got killed because he stopped paying money to the mob. And one thing we could do is we can invest in reducing crime and creating opportunities. And that's the kind of support we provide to countries throughout the world. I think we need to do a little bit more of that, and we need to be a little bit more oriented towards solving problems than perhaps the last administration was.
The debate over vaccine passports is heating up. Hear from a medical professor against the rollout and a former U.S. attorney who says it is the best path to our new normal. As tens of millions of Americans receive their COVID-19 vaccines, vaccine passports are now being debated. The idea that some businesses will require customers to show proof they have been vaccinated against COVID-19 to help them reopen safely. The Biden administration is not planning to create a vaccine passport, but the federal government is helping private companies develop standards surrounding them. Joining us for Point Counterpoint, legal affairs columnist for the Los Angeles Times and former U.S. Attorney Harry Litman, who is in favor, and Harvard medical professor Martin Kulldorff, who is opposed.
Yes, vaccine passport is a terrible idea from a public health perspective. Public health, for two reasons. Public health is based on trust, and trust between public health officials and the public. And coercion, and vaccine passport is a form of coercion, diminishes that trust. So if people are coerced to do something, they will be less trustful. And that will not only affect the COVID vaccine and the willingness to take the COVID vaccine, which is very important for older people, but also the willingness, the trust and the willingness to take other vaccines, like childhood vaccines, which are very, very important, that we get as many people to take as possible. So for the last few decades, we have worked very, very hard to build up trust in vaccinations. And those who are pushing for vaccine passports, they are really sort of undermining that trust. And they are doing a lot more damage to the vaccinations than the small group of anti-vaxxers have ever been able to do.
Look, I mean, he's wrong on both counts. It doesn't diminish trust. Does it diminish trust when you have to go to a country that requires a vaccine to show it? What diminishes trust is what they want. The liberty that they're talking about is to not get it and to not have to tell anybody. But, the people who are around you, that's what's going to diminish trust. You won't know if the people there have had vaccines or not. And of course, there's no reason to think that the people who are deciding, I don't want a vaccine, are the ones who don't need it. To the contrary, we saw in many states, people said, we don't need masks. And then the vaccine rate shot up. There's just no evidence at all to this notion that having to explain that you've had a vaccine diminishes trust. It's completely comparable to what we do on many counts. And that's why all mainstream epidemiologists agree it should be encouraged. And Dr. Koldorf here is very much in the margins, and Twitter, among others, have posted his ideas as misleading, as they did with President Trump, for this reason. It's just a mischaracterization of what public health officials think.
All right, so you heard from our two guests. Now it is your turn to join the conversation. Tweet us using the hashtag InsideCAPolitics. Inside California Politics will be back after the break.
Right now, you can find all of our full interviews online. Just click on your local station's website and click on the Inside California Politics tab. And next Sunday, join us for an exclusive town hall with California Senator Alex Padilla. We will be covering a wide range of topics from the pandemic to immigration. Submit your questions for Senator Padilla on Twitter using the hashtag InsideCAPolitics. Thanks for joining us this week for Inside California Politics.
We will see you back here next week.